So good morning, everyone, and welcome back for SUS Talk number 5. Today we have Vinay Prashant, one of our mafiosos who represents a very interesting angle for sustainability through the lens of native arts and craft, through the added lens of processes and materials for native arts and crafts. I'm going to hand it over to Vinay. We'll run for half an hour through his talk and then follow it up with Q&A.
Yeah, awesome. So, good morning to the Mafioso community. It's great to be, first of all, part of Sustainability Mafia. I think it's fantastic to find, like-minded individuals who, are doing such great work in their own spheres. So, I'd like to quickly introduce the primary founder of Tamala. So this is Suvarna, and she'll just come over and say hi. She doesn't speak much, but
hello. Hi.
So Suvarna is the one who started Tamala about 5 years back, and I joined her about 4 years back, full-fledged. And she handles design, and she handles curation, and she handles all artistic discussions where she has created a second level of artists who work with craftspeople also. So that was her vision, where she herself, being a visual artist, she wanted to bring visual art practices in traditional and tribal crafts without altering their style. So that was one of the things, like a design intervention that she was thinking of. And she has actually managed to replicate, the work she does in 5 other artists who also work in the villages. So that's like that's what has happened. And I'll take over. So she just says hi, and I'll take over for the rest of the talk. But it's important to start with the origin. So a very quick brief introduction. Like I said, vision is for the short term vision is to empower about 1,000 artisans across India. And we are the reason why we have got into this is very simple. I think India has about 738 craft and art clusters. It's an amazing rich ecosystem and culture for all forms of visual art and all forms of handicraft. I think where we are kind of missing out is that our schools and our educational curriculum does not cover any one of these 738 art or craft forms. So what happens is, we grow up as adults, and we almost go through our entire life not knowing the richness of art heritage that is there in India. There is actually about a unique art or craft form every 100 kilometers or less than that also. In some cases, it's packed into a small area of about 10 kilometers. You have GI tagged, non-GI tagged, multiple kind of art and craft forms which are richly available in any cluster. So so one part of this is we wanted it to be a great discovery for people, where and we bring the art forms, we bring stories from across India. So that was one reason why we started Tamala. And the second was, we found a lot of award-winning artisans and craftspeople actually struggling for their livelihood, which is the worst thing that could happen. We had state award winners, we had president gold medal winners who are actually struggling for a livelihood. So we said, hey, if the gold medal winner is struggling for a livelihood in art and craft, then what would be the average craft artisan doing? Struggling even more, obviously. And there was one very good reason for that. The primary issue would be that, in many of the craft clusters, we find that traders and intermediaries take over in rural art and craft. If you were to see in many of the clusters in places like Rajasthan, or I would say there are examples across India, where artisans just about get enough to eat and make nowhere near the final selling price of the product. So the second aspect that we were looking at was that, hey, can we make sure that at least 60% of the final price goes back to the artisan? So that would be like amazing. So let's say he was earlier earning 5 rupee out of a 100 rupee final selling price. If he earns 60, now that's a huge gap that we have covered in terms of livelihood. So that is a one more aspect that we looked at. So we've built Tamala on the natural principles of giving. We feel that we should give back a lot to our own crafts, give them the support, give them the psychological edge that what they are doing is not wrong. So culture and society generally holds art and craft in India and also in many other parts of the world as a very low level of work. And artisans and craftspeople's next generation also feel very ashamed to say that they're going to take up their own profession. So most of them come to the city, they get a average college education in the villages. Their English communication skills is very poor. So what they end up as dunzo delivery boys, Uber, Ola drivers at best, loaders, all kinds of miscellaneous jobs. So there's this wonderful heritage that they have, which could be maybe 1,000, 2,000 years old in their hands. And what are they doing? They're doing labor job after doing graduation. So we don't, that's not my idea of a successful life, right? So, and Suvarna also believes that, if they continue working with their hands and doing what they're doing, their happiness index is going to be at a much, much, much higher level. It's because, art itself is bringing happiness to all of us. The minute we interact with art, why do we feel happy? We feel happy because it's a man-made, human-made creation, and that brings a lot of happiness into our homes and offices. That's the primary reason why we interact with art. And them creating gives even more happiness. So that is one. And second, there's a financial reason, right? So when you're living in the village, actually 5,000 rupees per individual per month is enough for a sustainable lifestyle. Whereas when you come to the city, 20,000 rupees per month is also not enough. And why? Because, you have to pay rent, you have to eat out. Everything is expensive in the city. And you also have to send the minimum 5,000 back home. So how does, an artisan who moves to the city survive? So we looked at this aspect also. And then there is the addiction, right? People come to the city life is very stressful. They're hardly making enough money, and they end up with tobacco, drugs, alcohol, all the other forms of addictions. So these are also part of our experiences, which I'm generally talking about. So what has been our social impact journey? I would say that, we have looked at basic innovations like the eco-friendly Ganesha. We looked at it about 5 years back, and we kind of popularized it. And of course, it's not a unique innovation to us. It's something that's been done by a lot of other people also over the years. So that's perfectly fine. And also, one aspect of the eco-friendly Ganesha is that, if you're able to, do a Visarjan in the home itself, and if it is actually creating, your garden soil in your kitchen garden, that's one fantastic thing that you can do. Even a lake Visarjan of a Ganesha, if it does not harm the lakes and actually helps it, because it's bringing fresh clay and soil, I think that's also a great aspect from a sustainability point of view. So we've been covered by the PR on all our initiatives. I think the press and the editors love what we do, and this is all free press. So none of it is, we have a zero marketing budget. So more than 25 articles have been written, and every time an article has been written, we have two outcomes actually. One, we have a group of rural artisans who actually line up outside saying that, sir, we want to work with you because you seem to be genuine and you seem to be the kind of people we should be working with. And on the other hand, of course, we have customers. Generally, we have noticed that vernacular mediums get us artisans, and English mediums, get us customers. So this is just an overview of, we have also done design interventions for an American management training company where we created a management strategy game using, rural craft and using a combination of, design and innovation and all that. And we work regularly with, so what Suvarna has done is she's kind of integrated with students in MIT, Pune, NIFTs, NIDs, and we send students to do small projects in the villages. Not very long because we can't afford them too much. They're very expensive. But 1 week, 2 week kind of projects, which can lead to some kind of, great ideas. And 1 week actually is enough for these kids. They're so bright and, amazing that they always come up with something new, which we can actually, create and customize and float in the market as a product. And one of the big stories that is working for us is actually the retail innovation, the rural innovation of the terracotta mobile amplifier, which few of you have already seen and experienced and also possess at your homes. So the journey so far has been that, we've kind of covered about 39 indigenous craft forms. Our engagement level with each of these craft forms, however, is, different, because it's again a question of bandwidth as to how much we can engage with what craft form and how much sales pipeline is there to support each craft form. So for us, since we are a bootstrap company, for us, what number of craft forms that we deal with and number of artisans we deal with every cluster is just a direct outcome of what kind of patrons are there at the other end of the line. So despite all our innovations and amazing amount of PR coverage and all that, our growth is organic and it is relatively slow, I would say, compared to any other form of business, because it's also involves a educational process where you tell the customer comes to us first time after they read an article, then they realize that we are doing more work in this. So it's a slow process where they start getting into more art appreciation also themselves. And the workshops and discussions that we conduct in the studio space, which you're seeing behind me, is a small studio space we have in South Bangalore. So that helps a lot, because that brings in, the discussions are really, really important when we don't have any other ecosystem which enables information readily available, about indigenous craft forms. In fact, you will not find it anywhere. If you go into the internet and search how many craft forms are there in India, you will not find a single proper comprehensive resource. That's how it is. And how many people are employed in this sector? 5 crores. It's a huge number. After agriculture, it's the number 2 employer in India. So is livelihoods really important? Yes, it is. Is reverse migration or migration of people, creating a huge issue, and can that issue be an opportunity for, reviving our traditional crafts? Absolutely, yes. So these are aspects which, are very, even more relevant when we are coming to a post-COVID era. So why are we a social impact organization? I'd just like to quickly cover. That's because we measure our metrics with how many livelihoods we have created for how many artisans. Our objective is obviously that we want to create a revenue of about 60,000 rupees per annum per artisan, because we feel that, 5,000 rupees per artisan per month, given the fact that most of them are also small farmers and they do 60% of the time is in art and craft and handicraft, traditional handicraft. And the other 40% of the time is spent in farming in their own small holding. They're all small holding farmers. So that's our target income, and we are, of course, very, very far away, as you can see, from the objective. But yes, this is our primary metric. This is how we measure our progress, and this is how we measure as to what impact we are creating in the villages. And as you can see that what has been the good sign is that we've increased the number of people who are in the median level of in the 10 to 20,000 rupee bracket. We've actually increased that number quite a lot in the last couple of years. So that's very heartening, which also means that, we have to do better storytelling for each craft form. So right now we are involved in about 39 art and craft forms. Yeah, my perfect world in 2030 would be that we work with about 15,000 artisans across India. So we also believe that the first 1,000 will be the most difficult to support. But then once you hit a particular number, then there would be some critical mass that would be created that would take us forward, both in terms of number of patrons. So we have only about 3,000 patrons overall for the South Bangalore studio. And we work with about 15 institutions like IIMs and NIT and a couple of NITs as their official handicrafts gifting. So once the number of clientele also increases, that increases our critical mass as to how much we can scale up. Yeah, in an unrestricted world, if Jeff Bezos gave me so many $1 million, what would we do? Yeah, so we would. We have a very clear vision on how we can create an end-to-end ecosystem supporting native arts and crafts. In fact, I was asked by somebody in the Niti Aayog also to make a presentation, but then these things I don't know how they work. Especially with the government agencies, but they are a critical part of the solution. Actually, the government has created a huge amount of infrastructure in the arts and crafts in terms of both training centers like the RDTC, which is the regional design training center, which is available in places like Bangalore, and they are available in a few more places across the country. And they have ecosystems which are like HEARTS, and they have their own purchase departments in their own offices, which are supposed to procure arts and crafts. So all these things, if we are able to stitch them end to end, where we use the government infrastructure, and we are able to also serve an end customer, which is both in retail and in corporate, and we mandate, let's say, CSR money has to be or purchases of all government departments have to be 100% on Indian made product, because today a lot of that money is also going to China or Chinese products. So if you were to do an end-to-end scenario where we also work with the government stakeholders, we create a good retail market, and we also make sure that the corporate and large institutions also end up buying Indian creations, simply because there are so many, and mostly they are not selling today, or many of the art clusters are dying because there is no awareness. It's there is nobody to blame for this because there's no ecosystem. So that's the vision. And best project till date has been the TMAP, which is the Terracotta Mobile Amplifier project, which is our one product. Of course, we have 15 designs in that. This is the most successful design which we are showing you, which includes 3 clusters. So we work with the Chenapatna Woodcrafters. There are about 5 artisans there. We work with the clay makers, who the biggest aspect of the terracotta mobile amplifier is obviously the terracotta. So we have about 32 potters in Karnataka, and we work with about 5 of them for this project. And we work with a self-help group in Jigni, which is on the outskirts of Bangalore, where we have a group of village women who have also unfortunately recently lost their livelihoods and jobs in mills where they have been sacked. So this is one product which is creating, and so the woodcrafters make the small bangle on which the terracotta amplifier sits. The amplifier itself is made in terracotta, the painting of which happens in Jigni. So we have 3 clusters which are involved in one product, and that makes it a very exciting project for us. And we have customers who really like the product. So unfortunately, we're not able to figure out how to ship this outside Bangalore. Otherwise, by now we would have done thousands of numbers. But in Bangalore itself, the product is really doing well. So I literally am shipping, every day across Bangalore. So yeah, what's the dynamics of the market? It's a 2,24,000 gifting market, just gifting alone. I'm not talking about art or high-end art purchases. That's a totally different market. I'm talking about regular gifting market in India is 2,24,000 crores, out of which 14,000 crores is Indian handicrafts and art, and the remaining is and biggest competition is Chinese in this. So why that happens? Like I told you, Chinese make really over products. Their manufacturing capability is really high. Their ability to bring down prices and create value is really high. So there are some great things we can learn from them, and we are learning from some of those, and trying to see if we can apply those principles in traditional handicrafts. But the most important and critical aspect is that if we start appreciating handmade, and then we start appreciating, what our own country has to give us, I think those are major changes that will happen in the way people, come forward and buy products. This is the dynamics. What I would tell Anand Mahindra, I love these slides. Actually, these slides are really nice. So yeah, I would tell him that we need to automate the construction industry. One of the biggest reasons why our country is in such a flux now is the reverse migration that has happened of all the construction labor that has gone back to their villages. And it's such a sad thing the way we have treated them. Many of them are farmers. Some of them are also artisans, actually. We know our own relatives of our own craftspeople who have actually done this journey back to the villages walking. It's really sad. So if automation has to be done in one industry, it has to be in the construction industry, right? And what we should be doing is promoting rural livelihoods and craft, and both agriculture and native craft. What I would tell Mr. Narendra Modi, the Honorable Prime Minister, I would say that Make in India has to have two components. One is handmade in India and machine made in India. Why handmade in India, right? Now, the entire, like I said, handicrafts industry has about 5 crore unlisted artisans. 70 lakhs are listed artisans, meaning they have craft maker certificates from the government departments. But another 5 crores are totally unlisted, like the potters. You have so many, bamboo weavers, basket makers. You have these jhadu makers, the ones who make broomsticks and all that. These are all unlisted. They're not. They don't pop up anywhere. People who work with hay, people who work with different types of grass. None of them are covered. So handmade in India actually has the capability of generating more employment when you really want it. And machine made in India obviously does the reverse. It eliminates the need for human labor. When you have a country so populous and you have to create, employment at an individual level, then handmade in India is the most critical way of going about it. And what better way to do it than with our own, traditional and tribal crafts, and just, get more people to come back and do it, come back to the villages. Anyway, they're coming back to they're back to the villages. And many of them don't want to come to the city. It's just that they're not clear what they want to do. Besides the MG and Rega, which are giving some livelihoods, very, very paltry livelihoods, and the ration, which is giving them food, they have actually no clarity what they want to do with the future. So what I would tell Mr. Shekhar Gupta, please cover and talk about handmade in India, because the press has the most critical role in making people's and public perceptions. What I would tell Mr. Amitabh Bachchan is to promote handmade in India heavily. Like I would say, one of the biggest PR successes that we would have seen in the recent past or the last decade was the, Gujarat tourism campaign, right? All of us remember that. And his voice, his standing among people, his ability to, come across so earnestly, he's the right person who can promote handmade in India and make it an integral part of every household. You think that Indians have stopped, shopping during the lockdown? It's not so at all. You see outside every single apartment complex, they have created, almaris and almaris of stuff where Amazon and Flipkart and Myntra are leaving their products. So shopping is happening every day. So it's not that our consumers have stopped buying stuff, but what is missing is obviously the promotion for handmade in India. So this is the right time to talk about this. And what I would tell the next mafioso: live the sustainability cred and the sustainable way of life. So, yeah. Question and answer.
Vinay, that was awesome. Your enthusiasm is just on fire. It's too good. I'd like to start you off with two questions. One, what can the sustainability mafia do for you, in achieving your ambitions? And the second one is, in this time of ban China and everything, you're most affected by the Chinese presence in this market. How do you see that whole sentiment, whether it be a nationalist sentiment? How do you see it affecting your ask for made in India, handmade in India?
Fantastic. So yeah, how the mafiosos can help us is help us get in touch with decision makers. Since we are a bootstrap organization, and for us, sales is the primary driver for generating more livelihoods. We need to sell more and to sell more to more institutions. You'll be really surprised to know that even organizations like Infosys, which have 700 crore CSR budget, out of which 45 crore is in our category, livelihoods, rural livelihoods. They buy Chinese products as gifts. So there is, I mean, just doesn't make any sense. So when you have a CSR agenda and then you're still buying, so the problem is the intermediaries, the purchase heads, the VP purchase, the manager purchase. These people don't have the sensitivity. They don't have the awareness of what to do, of where to go, and some random foreign guest comes also, they end up giving some Chinese product to them as a memento many times. I won't say this happens in Infosys particularly, but it does happen across the companies. So I would say just introduction so that we can tell our story more to more key members and decision makers. That would be the biggest help. Second, see, I'm not saying we should be against Chinese products. It's not the right approach, right? They're creating value, and that country is a totalitarian regime, and we don't know what pains the people are going through to actually make those whatever they're making. So I'm not saying that. That's a totally different debate. What I'm saying is that we should celebrate what we have, and we should cherish and nurture what we have. And if we can do that, then it doesn't matter how much the market shrinks overall in terms of even gifting. Is suppose we say 30% market is going to shrink, but if we start celebrating and identifying, and let's say even we celebrate our own villages from where we come, or our own regions from where we come, and we say, hey, this creation is made by craftspeople who are from my village. Let me patronize by just I have some visitors coming to my office next week. Let me patronize my own cluster, my own area which I belong to. So that's all it takes, and we will make sure that we have more mouths to supplement during this critical phase of COVID. So that's.
Lavanya has a question.
Yeah.
Lavanya?
Hello.
Hi, Lavanya.
Hi, Vinay. How are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. So, generally, what I've heard from people in this space is that traditional handicrafts are passed from generation to generation, right? And often younger folks don't want to carry on this legacy. Maybe they don't see it as something that's glamorous or something that's fetching them as many financial returns as an alternative livelihood in the city. So how do you think we can balance the need of young people, basically the freedom of young people to choose their own livelihood versus the need to preserve these traditional handicrafts?
So one of the critical aspects we need to look at is that the society itself, our entire schooling system itself, derides traditional and native handicrafts. So yes, you have your parents, doing pottery. You have your parents doing some traditional craft forms, but your schooling system really looks down upon it. In fact, if you were to be found sketching on paper in a government school, you will be asked to stand outside, right? It's not really something. Art and craft is really looked down upon in India as in terms of its educational system. Also, the way we define success as a society is that success is you should get a degree, typically for a person living in the village, get a degree and go to the city and get a job. That is the definition of success. So society has created this definition where for for the average Dunzo boy, in fact, I'll tell you a very good example. We do this eco-friendly Ganesha every year, and last year we did about 2,000 home deliveries. Out of the 75 Dunzo boys who were allocated to us for deliveries, about 6 or 7 of them were actually from potter families, kumbars. And they had tears in their eyes when they had to take the delivery. Because they were saying, boss, sir, this is what I should be doing in my village, not delivering this Ganesha. I should be making it in the first place. So they're not happy once they come here. But they will never go back to the village because it's a shame to go back to the village. So they're stuck in a limbo. They're in no man's land. And that's the life they will lead for the whole life. They will be stuck in a no man's land. Neither here nor there. We have seen 3 cases, which I have also written about in a couple of blogs. Actually, we've seen more than 10 cases where our own craftsperson's next generation has actually gone back to the village, and either we have enabled them or somehow the system has enabled them to lead a better life. Like we've had examples of people who have done high-end animation design who went back, and the children were the ones who were able to coordinate with us to do that American Management Training Kit project, for example. Or we've seen examples of people going back and doing helping their family sell much better because they come with that sales understanding and marketing understanding and social media understanding and all those how things work. So yeah, I mean I think that's the aspect we should be talking about more, saying that if you choose to be an engineer and that's what you really want to do in your life and you want to become a great engineer, then so be it. But many of them, at least a significant percentage, for them, that's not the default choice. They would rather live in the village. They would rather try and do whatever they could in the village. But the whole ecosystem does not allow them to do so.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah, thank you.
Oh yeah. There is
Poonam.
one more.
Poonam.
There's one more question I can see.
Yeah, that's from Poonam.
Daily Dump, right?
Oh, she's on mute right now. I'll ask it for her. From what I understand, Vinay, there are many cooperative platforms that promote crafts. What is your experience with them?
So the problem with art and craft in India and with design-centric people is so egos come in the way of collaboration. There are many government institutions which are created both at a state level and national level, and then there is design institutes also. So all over we have very inflated egos. So it becomes very difficult to get everybody onto the same page and to work together. One good example of that is Craft Council Delhi. So we had adopted something called Handmade in India as a hashtag about 4 years back. And Craft Council Delhi in the month of April announced it as their official logo, saying Handmade in India. So we were really happy. Hey, finally there's someone who's talking about Handmade in India. Mr. Modi has been talking about Make in India for a long time, but no one has ever spoken about Handmade in India. And also the way handmade is treated is very funny from the government's point of view. The entire handicrafts ministry does not have a ministry. So the handicrafts is a subset of the textile industry ministry, which is focusing on machine-made loom textiles. So you have made a beautiful, hand-created industry subservient to a machine-made industry, which is really funny. And hence it will never get the focus that it needs to get. So from a policy and from, a clarity point of view of what the government wants to do, we don't really see too much of it as of now. And cooperative platforms, like I said, all have their own individual approaches. And we try and create as many collaborations as possible, because in this space, that's the only way that we can create more livelihoods. And we love it when we meet people who can, speak plainly, and that's what we keep. These kind of interactions is what we are looking forward to. I hope I answered some of your questions.
Yeah. Manjunath has a question, and then Ganesh.
Yeah.
Unmute, yeah, unmute. Hi, Vinay, and hi, everybody.
Hi,
See,
Vinay.
because I represent the media also, so I know what exactly you meant, Vinay. And also, I've seen a lot of NGOs, they're deep rooted with the tribals and the villages. So
Yes.
did you, I mean, I know it's difficult to get through the NGOs, but there are very good NGOs that really work on the grassroots levels.
Yes.
Isn't it also for you to reach out to the artisans, to the people, and also for the whole process, does the NGOs will help you out in some
Yes,
way?
they help a lot. They help a lot, Manjunath. So wherever our bandwidth is less, we have collaborated with NGOs. Like there's a wonderful NGO which runs a brand called Potli in Delhi, which helps us with a lot of the North Belt artisans. And there are a couple of other NGOs or self-help groups which have formed with whom we collaborate directly, and we've already been working with them. So, like I said, NGOs also have some. They also have some restrictions on who and how they can operate. So we work with Seva, for example, which is an NGO in Bangalore, in Kormangala. It's a well-known NGO which works with disabled, challenged children, and we use their products for our packaging and all that, because that's another additional way of creating some impact in the. But yeah, there are some restrictions on how NGOs want to reach out and work with us. But wherever possible, we've been trying to create alliances and work with them. We're always open, obviously. Anybody wants to collaborate? First thing. I hope I answered your question, Manju.
Yes, Vinay.
Yeah.
Ganesh?
So thank you so much, Vinay. I mean, I still remember meeting you at that RV Institute of Management panel discussion, after which I was thoroughly impressed. And I came to your this one also.
Studio, yeah.
Studio. Sorry. And I got that wonderful Saptaswara generating bells made out of by the completely handmade, and that's that's a favorite toy my son even plays today, and it's been for more than 4 months. I have not got a replacement, which is better than
that's
that.
Really wonderful.
So thank you so much for actually working in this field, I should say, because I didn't know about the value until I actually came to your studio and know the importance of it. And I feel a lot sustained, because you actually explained me how it was made. That's when I understand it as like the energy consumption or water consumption.
Yes,
everything. I am little clinical on that aspect.
Whatever
toy I want to get for my son, I want to be very sure that what toys he wants to buy later in his life, and that's left to him. I can't change that choice, but within the choices, I'm a choice architect, as the book Nudge says. So right,
no,
I really want.
That's a fantastic point, actually.
So I really was impressed by that fact that all these artisans, I mean, in age-old way, we are very sustainable. We work without, I don't know if it was deliberate or without deliberate. There was no other option, drying over sun, not using a oven or something like that. So all these things they have been practicing. I think that's something that I also wanted to bring in this discussion from my own observation of visiting your studio. So how much conscious of, I mean, as I said, it was very, every process that involved in making the toys that you told me, my interest was all toys, as a father, as a new father, I look at toys and stories as the most powerful means to. So that's what I wanted to make comment. Another comment I also want to make is I come from a family where one of my dad's elder brother was an artist. And it was not really appreciated during that time. He had to leave home. We never found him back in our entire life. I mean, my dad's elder brother, he was an artist, he was a painter. When Lakshman, R.K. Lakshman was impressed by his work, but they didn't support. So one thing that I also want to bring into this is, and it so happened that when I grew up, I was fully involved in art and painting. In fact, I don't know if I'm bragging it or not, I almost won all the awards during my school days in painting, including Hindu Young World and Shankar's International. But
That's wonderful.
No, but you know what happened to me? I was so influenced by my peers. My parents didn't influence me. My father always thought I could be a fine arts. My mother also thought I could be into fine arts. My father had lost his brother, right? You know the pain. But you know what happened to me? I got influenced by all the other people and decided to get into engineering. It is multiple ways. I mean, the narrative of I don't know. I can't say. I don't know the metric of success. I'm too young to define what success means. But I do feel that path was actually I didn't take it forward myself. So I would urge Manjunath and others in media to tell stories on this path of going into art. I mean, I always believe earth without art is right?
Absolutely. So there are two aspects. There are two aspects you're actually bringing out. One is that native art and craft is inherently sustainable. So, for example, when our potters, work to make the terracotta amplifier, which is our most spoken about product right now. So the potters create this out of clay, which is from their neighboring pond in their village. So that inherently makes it sustainable, because once that they remove the clay, it's like a natural dredging of the river, and the clay removal allows more rainwater to percolate into the groundwater. So there is an inherent sustainability in the whole process of collecting the clay and also, preparing the clay. That's a very important aspect that you brought out, Ganesh. Second, the bangle on which it sits, right? All our Chenapatna products, the wood is actually given by the forest department. So this is called green wood, which is, comes from fallen branches and dead trees in the forest. So the minute you're talking about green wood, you're not harming, the forest or any tree for extracting the wood itself. So there's a mandate that the Ramnagara and Chenapatna forest departments have to sell the such fallen branches to the craft park. So that's how we get our wood there. And the color that we use. So the color that you see here has a beautiful shine. So you might think it is artificial, but the beauty is that this is a pure organic color. And the color itself is lac, which is extracted from the trees. And organic color is added to lac to give it this sheen. So in this case, we are using, let's say, kumkum for the red. We use haldi for the yellow. And we use jamun fruits extract for purple, and so on and so forth. It's all organic colors which we are using. In fact, we have an organic color swatch. Whenever someone wants to do something customized for their school or for their organization, we have a color swatch saying that these are the colors. We don't have Vibgyor. We have organic colors swatch, which is different. The other aspect which you're talking about, Ganesh, which is about our education system and how it creates. See, if you have an artistic orientation, if you have an artistic input, you can still become an engineer or a doctor or an architect or anything. But how you view things and how you perceive things becomes inherently very different. So what point you're raising is actually much deeper. In fact, they say that there are 7 types of intelligence, right? There are 7 types of intelligence, and IQ, which is measured on probably only one type of intelligence, right? So what we are missing out is actually many other types of and forms of intelligence in India, in our educational system. So I think that is a huge, that is actually 10, conferences worth material. We can't cover it in.
With that thought in mind, Vinay, I think it would be really cool if whenever we can freely move around, other mafiosos can also come by your studio and check it out. It'll be so nice that beyond such talks, we can actually have our members go to each other's offices and physical spaces.
Absolutely.
To get inspired, to find new ways to collaborate. Poonam, you had 2-3 questions. Do you want me to ask, or are you?
Yeah, no. Now I can speak. Thank you. Okay. Great work, Vinay.
Oh, thank you so much.
I am wondering whether you know any potter communities in different parts of India, because we make composters, and we are having a challenge getting enough skilled potters all over the country. The demand is high, but we're not able to get potters. Either the clay is wrong or the firing is wrong. So those are the issues. So if you know anybody, let us know.
Yeah. No. So we work with 32 potters in Karnataka, and we work with potters in Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh.
So but they all make small products, no?
No, so the variety is we need to have a separate discussion.
Yeah,
So
sure.
so we make things like Suvarna. Just take out the chota Shantiniketan inspired Ganesha. No? So we make things from small miniatures to large architectural pots which are 2 meters tall.
So the problem is that the products that we make are going to be used not for the so-called skill set thing, but they're utilitarian products.
Of course.
So there is a price point issue with this particular product.
It's perfectly fine.
If you can have, we'll take this discussion offline. If you send me your email ID, and I'd be very interested, because we've been trying to get as many potters on board.
So we have, and in fact, the pottery community is also very badly impacted now because the entire summer is gone, and whatever little matke kutke production has happened is lying waste. Yeah. The matkas, the kulharts, they are all lying waste. They have not sold anything in this entire summer season. As it is, we had a problem with modern day refrigeration taking over from sustainable forms of cooling, and we were not using earthen pots anymore. But this has been like a huge double whammy. So yes, potter community, if we can do something, if you can give any jobs to them, they'll be happy to take it up. We'll discuss this indeed.
You were looking for e-commerce connects to sell your product around the country, right?
Yes. In fact, Better India had approached us, but they had approached us at a time when we had no bandwidth to even get back to them. It was in the middle of the Ganesha season, and we were in the middle of 2,000 dispatches across Bangalore. But the person who reached out to us from Better India, she quit the job. She was actually aggressively following us up with us. But now I think we're trying to get back to them. And so these are the kind of platforms that would be useful for us. Better India. The regular Amazon, Flipkarts of the world are better for generally Chinese imported products, because you need to have a huge bandwidth in margin to play the kind of game they want you to play. Your listing price is 100 rupees. They want you to minimum discount it by 30% and give offers, for your listings to go up. And then they also take a 20% commission in the middle. So handmade products and being transparent with your pricing is not useful for us to go onto platforms like Amazon and Flipkart and Myntras of the world. So it has to be places like Better India or other communities which are more understanding in. They understand that handicrafts our objective is that we are selling this product for 500 rupees, and we are trying to ensure that 60% of the earnings goes to 3 different clusters. So how much margin can I give Amazon? I can't give them anything, almost nothing. So our objective is to get this idea also going across and break the barrier of price. That is also an important aspect.
You've got one big fan today, at least. Jay, just dropped a comment in the chat window.
Yeah, we constantly look for local handmade and local stuff, and I think knowing this is superb. I think it would be great if we could produce a nice handout. I have noticed whenever we've got these pieces of paper that come with the item, at least in our community, which is, in the renewable space, the sustainability space, it's really good to also for people to see that, this has come through this source and this is how it has actually made a difference. I mean, we talk about embodied energy and embodied materials, new materials, sustainable materials, all these things in our work, which is more at the mega scale, but then also to show this in the micro scale or the small scale is great. And I'm really happy to come across this, and I will definitely go through your website, and we shall have something. We have a lot of guest speakers come from abroad, come locally, and it's not a big number, but still it's a good start for people to get this thing. So definitely get on board.
Really happy to.
Yeah, every organization has a gifting budget, and by default we just go for the more expensive, fancy, not handmade.
We're all going to Kaveri, right, for some reason or the other.
So actually the problem with Kaveri Emporium is, so about 4 of the artisans have moved from Kaveri to work with us. So the issue there is that, the payment cycles are like 90 days, 180 days. The contrary aspect is that we pay in advance. We pay that 60% of that value in advance, because that we want him to continue working in a comfort zone, right?
Right.
Kaveri does 90 days payment, and they also have a lot of graft in Kaveri. So the purchase manager, the store manager, everybody needs a kickback in that. So where will the artisan make any money at the end of it?
So Vinay, as you scale, how do you deal with, I mean, the same issue will, I mean, we're still the same population. Right? How do you deal with this as you scale?
Oh, that's a tough part actually, because graft is very important to get through corporate discussions, and we are right now flunk on that test. So
no, because it is a serious. I mean, whatever problems you're seeing in them is something that you will see in certain time. So it'll be good to see how we address this fundamentally and come up with some way.
It's a very good point, Jay. Actually, what we are looking at is where we have the founder of the company, let's say at a CEO level or a director level or a purchase head level, who believes in us, or the CFO, for example, believes what we're doing is really good. Their entry into the organization becomes very easy for us. Public institutions like IIMs, NITs, these are also good to work with for us, because they have a natural affinity to traditional craft and Indian made, and getting through. Of course, they're slow in their processes, being large organizations, but it's been a good experience for us working with them. So what is tough for us is penetrating MNCs, where there are multiple levels, and like you said, all those issues are there. So that's what we have to crack. But we have, for example, we work with Infosys CSR. Infosys CSR has adopted us as one of their partner organizations, and they've given us free space on the campus, which of course we are not able to use now due to COVID. But Infosys main again is difficult for us to penetrate. Like I said, there are multiple decision-making layers that we have to penetrate. So it's a very good point, and we have to figure out how to work through this.
So just one follow-on question. So how does this come vis-a-vis your Fab India kind of these things? I mean, they also use local products. How do you feed into them? What is the relationship there?
Fab India used to be primarily handmade and handicrafts, but I think after they had their investors coming on board, they have moved into more machine-made products, and generally they have moved away from handmade across the board if you were to analyze their products in great detail. So but their core at one point of time was handmade, yeah. So, but
so is it that of course, I mean, I guess all of this has got to do with the notion of scale, right? I mean, they've gone far bigger. So the question is, how does this particular model, see, if you want this to work, we have to also think about it from a scale perspective. So how do we get, is it that the size is always going to remain a particular size, or there is a way to scale this which is going to be more sustainable?
Yes. So the way to scale it is where we get more partner, we partner with more organizations, and we create employment for more craftspeople across the country. So the scale, like an investor expects typically, would be that they would want you to move away from handmade and move into machine made. That's how they think most of the times, and that's what has happened to Fab India also as a consequence. We have to think handmade.
I actually happen to know the CEO of Fab India, so let me ask him that question and see what he feels about that. Because I don't know, because my sense also is that there is the sense that when customer wants something, and they, suppose I tell you, when I go to Fab India and pick this up, and you go there and you don't find it, it's a customer lost in some way. So I don't know whether that is, it'll be good to find out what the real issue is and address that.
So in fact, there were a couple of news articles, if you remember, last year about how the government pulled up, the research laboratories pulled up Fab India for claiming something to be handmade and khadi, and they actually were machine-made loom products. So they said that this is misrepresentation and you're pricing it much higher. So obviously they were earning much more margins in the product, right? That's what the investors want you to do. They want more margins. They want their money back in 3 years. So you should ask him that question.
No, definitely. No, but it'll be also good to also have these pieces of, like I said, clearly there's a marketing angle to this. And I think having that nicely written up, especially from all those big points that people, from the big as well as the small, it's not just about providing employment, but also showing how the embodied energy and other things are far more sustainable. And then that kind of sells it really well in various markets.
Yes. So we need more storytellers also. Yeah. Thanks so much, Jay. We need more storytellers as customers. So for us, actually, our biggest promoters have been our own customers. Absolutely. If we can create more champions for this in each society, like for example, you live in a residential layout and you have one person, who speaks about it, it makes a huge difference for the whole neighborhood. So finding such champions at a local level in each community is important for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. All right.
I urge everybody in the Society Mafia to buy the toys or this one artistic work, and even write I mean, whatever you feel. I have written a recommendation on a Facebook page and Google map also. So I was very impressed with the product because, as Jay also said, the embedded energy and all those things impressed me a lot. And of course, my son loves it. So I was supposed to write it anyway.
We'll take one last question from Manjunath and then move on to office hours for the next half an hour. But last question from
the same point where Ganesh said about the digital field, Vinay, how strong are you? Many businesses run on digital, right?
Yes,
so,
yes.
I mean, they really sell hard. Even the rural belt people are watching the WhatsApps and all.
Yes.
How strong you are on the digital platform, Vinay?
So we are not strong, but traditionally we've been selling on WhatsApp and a little bit on Facebook and a little bit on Instagram. So social commerce has been not bad for us. In fact, out of the 2,000 Ganeshas that we sold last year, about 700 orders came from abroad. So these were from, our message went viral and it went all over the world. And then we had orders from New Zealand, from children who wanted to send Ganeshas to their parents who are living in Bangalore, Australia, Sweden, Norway. You cannot imagine the kind of, orders that I've got. It's just that I can't use that database for sending anything else right now. But yes, the social media has been a major way, and our products going viral on social media have been a major way for us to reach more people. So I think when there is a good product and the story is told well, it actually helps us a lot. But I would say we are very weak overall. It's a huge area for improvement. In fact, it's one of my asks on the on the platform, that we need help. We always need help.
Vinay, that was awesome. It was such a good conversation. It sounds like you want to make sustainable art and craft the default choice for all gifting in India. That aligns so well with our mandate of making sustainability the default choice overall. And in my head, I'm actually thinking of ways that we can bundle the two together, right? Sustainable solutions as a default choice and a reward system through arts and crafts, sustainable arts and crafts. So maybe we can, I think those two go hand in hand really well, and there's a lot to build on both those ideas. Thank you so much again. We're going to move into a half an hour of office hours. If anybody wants to stay and just hang, ask questions, comments, anything at all. But thank you for your time, Vinay.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great talking to all of you on the mediums. Thank you.